Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Vanny, for that great introduction and a little humbling. I appreciate that. I'm just, as you'll hear tonight, as I talk with the folks here on this forum, that I'm excited and passionate about working with organizations, and particularly excited about helping people implement our training and work that we do at Go Lean Six Sigma, and that usually takes the shape of projects or families of projects. So what we'll talk about today, as Vanny introduced, is how to create value in an organization, specifically talking about healthcare and contrasting it with a more common understanding around manufacturing and so forth. As Vanny said, this is a little bit about my background. I won't bore you anymore with that. But my role at Go Lean Six Sigma and client success is really on the twofold. I am responsible for our products and the content of our training and our resources and services, as also responsible for our voice to the customer and taking what we've learned in the field and what works and applying it back into our training and our coaching support with our clients. So a bit of what I'm going to share with you today comes from what we've learned over the last few years of working with clients in the field. So specifically, we're talking about Lean Six Sigma in healthcare and manufacturing and sort of the unique challenges those industries have. But before we do that, we'll talk a little bit about, well, just to level set. I know the audience is very familiar with Lean Six Sigma, so I'll make sure that we've kind of level set that briefly, and then we'll get into the challenge. And the challenge is really, regardless of the industry you're in, the need to continually accelerate how we improve. So it's not enough to be doing Lean Six Sigma. We've got to get better and better and better at driving improvement and growth in an organization. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the current situation in industries like healthcare and the public sector, which share some of the same challenges, not only in accelerating that improvement, but in doing it in the first place. There's some unique challenges that they need to face there or deal with. And one of the things that we've identified as a key solution, and it's not terribly new, it's always been easier said than done. So we'll talk about how we've been able to operationalize something we call a portfolio of projects that are strategic financial assets, or a value machine inside the organization. And so we'll talk about how to implement a value machine inside that. So we'll define it first and talk about how to do that. A couple of things that I'd like to do too as we get going in the presentation. It will help me with kind of focusing what topics to really emphasize. Can I get in the chat, if you wouldn't mind responding, and give me an idea where you're from, where you're located, and what industry you're with. I'll just kind of watch the chat as it scrolls through, but if you wouldn't mind sharing that with me, that would be a big help. Where you're located and what industry you're with. Seattle, Washington. Okay. Supply chain, software. Excellent. Others? Okay, so just a couple talking on the chat. I'll encourage you to do that. I've got a couple of polls for you as we go through, so I want feedback from you. All right, here we go. It's coming through now. Gaza, Manila, of course. I'm seeing service department, supply chain, banking, academy, the teacher in the Philippines, fantastic. Utilization management, any healthcare and manufacturing. I see education, a lot of education, academic. Excellent. And from all over, Zimbabwe, Philippines. Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, I encourage you to, as we the moderator said, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the session. We'll make sure we have ample time for that. And I've also built in a couple of questions along the way that they'll be a little easier to respond to. You just multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. So let's talk a little bit about Lean Six Sigma. I don't need to tell you that you know, we're myself included. I consider myself a little bit of a process nerd or a Lean Six Sigma nerd. So we know that every good or services that's provided by an organization is produced by a process. That's kind of a given to go through. So nothing new there. And we see processes every day, whether it's tying our shoes, baking a cake, going on a travel, going to lunch. But here's the challenge that every organization faces, and particularly in healthcare, it's acute. It's the fact that um, successful organizations. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback there. Successful organizations run on standardized processes. Their processes have standardized and focused on the customer. However, change, which is inevitable, and as nothing 2020 taught us for sure, it's accelerating. Who knows what's coming in the next month, the next quarter. So we're always dealing with not only accelerated competition, changing needs in the marketplace, but we may even have changing global economies and so forth. So change is inevitable, but change causes problems in processes. Sorry, the slides are jumping around a little bit. Changes causes problems in processes, and that threatens success. So problems need to be solved and processes need to be improved. That's where process improvement comes from. And organizations must build the problem-solving capabilities to be able to adapt and respond in a timely manner. So I was reminded of this no later than 3 days ago when I was talking to another business leader, and he asked me, do you think people really need problem solving anymore? I mean, Lean Six Sigma has been around for a while, and you know, it's been there, done that, and we're ready to move on to other things. And it kind of took me by surprise, because it's this situation that we live in that you never avoid or can never step away from the fact that processes are, need to be continually improved. And improved process is not a natural state. Processes left to themselves slowly deteriorate. So there's some level of effort that's always required just to maintain the status quo. And that's the challenge that we have as we try to drive continuous improvement. So when we talk about process improvement, and we'll talk about the unique challenges in healthcare and the public sector in just a moment, we're talking about working on the process versus working in the process. And most businesses, we spend a lot of time working in a process and even trying to prop that process up, make it work when it's broken. Then we have time to actually work to improve it. So we're really talking about spending a significant amount of resources and dedicating resources to working on processes as opposed to just in them, running the business and making things happen. And as you know, Lean Six Sigma is the latest, and it's been around for quite some time, but it's the latest technology that combines the tools and techniques to drive process improvement. And it's a very powerful combination of two very long-lived and very tried and true methodologies out in the industry and around the globe. Lean, which is really focused on driving flow in processes and creating value from the customer's perspective and minimizing waste in a value chain or in a process, which then increases throughput, productivity, and flow. And Six Sigma, which is really targeted toward reducing variation and minimizing defects. And so it gives you a very powerful integrated tool set, Lean Six Sigma, to help you tackle the type of problems you might have in a business. And any business is going to have both of those issues. They're going to have capacity, throughput, flow problems in their processes, but they're also going to have defects, variation in their services and their goods or products that they're producing. So very powerful technique. Lets you pull from the toolbox the tools you need to make the changes that you need to make in your business when you're trying to improve a process. What's a challenge here, and what's unique about Lean Six Sigma as well, is what we're trying to make happen is ever increasing rates of improvement as we go through the process. Now, without getting into too much detail on the methodology, we've got Lean and Six Sigma, that kind of combined combination of tools and techniques in the toolbox. They have a common foundation, though, before I go on any further. They're all based on focus on the customer, focus on process, how work gets done in the organization, and focused on a systematic means of improvement, an approach to doing that. And that systematic means of improvement is common in the industry, is DMAIC, DMAIC. It's a 5-phase process improvement methodology for driving change. It provides a structure, as I say here, guidance, and a simple path to help people work together to solve problems. Because as problems become more complex, as processes become more complex, we need more structure and tools to kind of help us work together to solve those problems. Process improvement, DMAIC. There are others out there, other methodologies you'll see in Lean Six Sigma. DMAIC's become kind of the standard since the late 90s, but they all have at their heart kind of the basic problem solving process of understanding the problem, defining the causes to the problem, coming up with alternatives, and then implementing the best solution. DMAIC kind of gives us a framework to follow that. Go Lean Six Sigma, we focus a lot of our training and effort on problem solving. There are other methodologies out there for process design and business process transformation, but the vast majority of our efforts we see in the marketplace are right around process improvement and the use of DMAIC. So that's a little bit of background on Lean Six Sigma and a little bit more about why organizations try to implement Lean Six Sigma and where they struggle.
Ken, apologies to interrupt. I think you accidentally pressed your mute button. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you for interrupting. I apologize for that. I'm not sure. I'm having a little bit of internet connection issues, so my apologies. Let me see if I can get that. I'm not sure where I lost you, so I'll pick up here. We're talking about why organizations do Lean Six Sigma to drive increases in efficiency, reduce the cost of poor quality, improve the customer experience, or in the case of healthcare, the patient experience, and to strengthen the organization and make it more agile and capable. So a little bit about what we mean by that, increase efficiency. So in a healthcare situation, what we're really looking for to drive improvement is increased capacity. It's not so much about driving revenue or necessarily about reducing cost. It's about trying to provide reducing cost per patient by trying to provide patient care to more patients with the same resources. So for example, before in process improvement, I may have a physician or a care provider that's providing a service to only 4 or 5 patients in the course of the day or course of their shift. And after process improvement, they're able to meet with 3 times as much or twice as many patients. And the idea there is you're getting more focus with the resources on value-added treatment to the patients and less on the non-value-added activities in the organization. But that's driving efficiency in the organization, something that can be measured, something that can that the organization can look to recognize progress. In addition to improving efficiency, there's the cost of poor quality. This is often underappreciated. And this is typically in manufacturing. We know that traditional quality cost, quality control, quality assurance, which deals with rework, reject, scrap, warranty, is around 4 to 10% of sales. But in reality, there's a lot more. The cost of poor quality that doesn't show up here, that shows up kind of under the waterline, and you particularly see this more in service and in healthcare organizations, especially as a service, when you see slow processes, late delivery, wasted resources and supplies, the need to expedite things, long cycle times, lost customer or patient loyalty to go to this care facility versus another. And so the cost of poor quality has been estimated to be not 10% of sales, but somewhere between 30% or more of sales. So there's a lot of resources, sometimes called the hidden factory in organizations that's tied up in this cost of poor quality. That's another one of the things you want to try to tackle or hit when you're implementing Lean Six Sigma. The other thing and this is particularly critical for healthcare, is the need to improve the customer or the patient experience. And that just really comes down to that customer focus. With understanding what the voice of the customer is saying, or the voice of the patient, actually walking the process, the gimbal walk, but also being the service or being the patient as they go through that process to see what they experience, and then creating operational measures, which we don't do very well in healthcare, especially, that really capture the voice of the customer, what's important to them, and how we track how the work gets done. Things like lead time, accuracy, and quality. So bottom line, the implementation of Lean Six Sigma, or I should say the successful implementation of Lean Six Sigma, I can tell you there's a lot of false starts out there, and a lot of organizations have struggled. And when they struggle, they don't get the benefits not only of efficiency, cost of quality, customer satisfaction, or strengthen the organization at all as it goes through the process. But if we're successful, then we're able to use Lean Six Sigma to achieve our goals. We'll become adaptive, a very agile organization, be able to increase the rate of improvement, be able to respond to changes in the marketplace, and we'll build in a culture of problem solvers. The issue of problem solvers, I just saw a study that was published for 2020 from World News and Report. It was a jobs report, and they talked about the jobs and what employers were looking for, and the top 10 job skills. Number one on the list was problem solving. That was 2020. The same report done in 2015, they do it every 5 years, was problem solving. So organizations still see the need for problem solvers. Number two on the list for 2020 was creativity. So they're needing creative problem solvers. I think as Elon Musk was quoted in just a few months ago, talking about some of the most critical skills going into the 2020s and beyond, the decades and beyond, is problem solving. That's what he sees that he needs for people, where they want to use automation technology to automate the standard processes and free individuals up to be creative and to solve problems. So problem solving is key, and being able to apply that systemically in an organization, particularly healthcare, is paramount. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare and some of the challenges that healthcare have. Healthcare is a unique environment. I'm not muted again, am I? Nope, I'm good. Healthcare is a unique environment in that it's mission driven. And you see this in public sector organizations as well. The government, state, and federal governments, and so forth are very mission-driven. People there because they want to make a difference. A lot of the colleagues and staff in healthcare are there because they want to help people. And so that's a very powerful part of being able to drive change and implement continuous improvement. However, there's a lot of barriers that a healthcare organization has to deal with. One of those is basically they're dealing with often a fixed revenue base. They're not really often for-profit. There are for-profit hospitals, but there's a lot of not-for-profit hospitals, and so they're driving on a fixed budget or fixed population and resources tied to that budget, or a fixed payer program. So there's not an opportunity to do more service and make more revenue to be successful. So they really have to do best with what they have. So they have a tendency to focus on budget quite a bit and cost management, but not tying cost to the process and how the work gets done. On top of that, they've got an aging population, particularly in the US, aging population with increasing healthcare needs and very healthcare resource intensive. So we're using a lot of resources in healthcare. And of course, there's not a lot of options there, so I've got the limited income coming in, I've got the service demand coming up, and in a lot of public hospitals or not for profit, if they were to cut cost and reduce their budget but maintain their services, the next year their budget gets cut, and so they'd have fewer resources. So there's no incentive in a lot of cases to drive improvement in that regard. So a real challenge in the healthcare organization. Some additional challenge, some things when we've talked to some of our healthcare clients, here's some of the things they've told us. They said, what are some of the challenges you see in healthcare? I said, well, in healthcare, it's very risk averse. So we don't want to do a lot of improvement, make a lot of changes, take a lot of risk, because if something goes wrong, it could be catastrophic and it ends up in the news or the local media. So very difficult to do. They also say there's many stakeholders to deal with, both in the healthcare system in the marketplace. So you got payers, you got providers, you got employers, but inside the hospital, it's very compartmentalized. It's one of the more difficult organizations. I come out of R&D, worked a lot in pharmaceutical engineering, defense contracting, NASA, the space program. I've worked in a lot of these type of very academic and very engineering specialized. Healthcare is probably the most specialized. If you think about the different care providers, technologists that are in this business, and they're very specialized in what they do, and they're organized in these silos. So they're very siloed in the process. Unfortunately, the customer doesn't experience a healthcare system, or the patient doesn't experience a healthcare system in a silo. They see it as a flow across those silos. We sometimes refer to them as chimneys of excellence. They're really good at what we do inside the radiology department or the laboratory or physical therapy, but moving a patient from their care environment, from their bed to the radiology to therapy, is where things get complicated and things fall through the gaps in the process. So very siloed. Something we hear all the time when people say we don't have time to do Lean Six Sigma, healthcare says the same thing. We don't have enough time to do this. And then lastly, and this is something that we hear a lot, and I want to speak more about as we go through too. We'll speak about all these, but quantifying benefits. Organizations, after they kind of get started with Lean Six Sigma, when they have some early success, when they really try to get serious and drive aggressive improvement, they want to see what kind of return they're getting on their investment. And they find they don't doing a very good job of doing that, and they're not able to realize or quantify benefits, so they lose momentum and lose interest. So anyway, I'm curious to hear from you. You tell me, just based on A, B, C, D, or E, answer in the chat, which of these do you think is the biggest challenge for you? What are you seeing in your experience in your organization or with organizations you've worked with? Just quickly, and I'll kind of watch the polls and try to get a sense of what the responses look like. Just respond A, B, C, or D, pick one in the chat. Okay, I see a bunch of B's, a bunch of D's, time, several B's, many stakeholders, yeah. B, A, B. Okay, so B looks to be a very common one. Oh, there's some A's. All right, very good. I know we've got it well over 100 on the call, so I won't bore you with going through all those. Okay. So we'll talk a bit about this as we go through. So risk averse, yeah, and many stakeholders, yeah. All right. Well, and so good to hear. Thanks for sharing that, and we'll hit on all of these in an approach I'm going to suggest in just a little bit of trying to create value and kind of create a systematic approach to creating value, which means you've got to manage all these things. Because the way we're organized in most organizations, healthcare being no exception and not unusual, is we're organized in functions and departments, but our processes flow across those. So we're often very compartmentalized. That means we've got a lot of silos. It also means we've got a lot of stakeholders, both in the business and outside the business. So we'll talk quite a bit about that. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that too. And it looked like B was very high on the list, with A and D being close behind. So we'll talk about each of those as we go through. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about this. With all those challenges, don't have enough time, too many stakeholders, we're too compartmentalized. But if you knew that there's a possibility, there's a vision out there that says, hey, your team, if you're a manager or if you're a senior executive, and you're looking at your processes in your team, what if your team could improve 25 to 50% year over year? What if you could track measurable improvements? I know we hear a lot in Lean Six Sigma about realized benefits and financial benefits, but that doesn't fit every organization. If I'm a school system, if I'm a state government, if I'm a not-for-profit hospital system, if I'm a public hospital system run by the government, then I'm not going to be able to drive financial results per se or revenue. I need to look at it differently. I may need to look at greater productivity. I may want to look at less cost per patient or less cost per unit. But what it does require is that every manager inside the organization that's providing some sort of output, product or service or patient care in the case of healthcare, knows what it costs to provide that care. That's something we don't do very well. We look at budgets in the aggregate, but we don't tie it to the work that's done, to the process, like we talked about before. So that's part of the challenge of kind of dealing with some of the issues that we talked about here. Because the fact of the matter is, even though we don't have a lot of time, even though we've got a lot of stakeholders to deal with, even though we've got a lot of challenges in quantifying the benefits, everybody's doing their work, but they're also trying to improve the work. So they're trying to do it. They're just not always using the best methods, and they're not always working together to make it happen. So here's what I would suggest as a way to kind of drive not only improvement in an organization, but particularly in healthcare and in public organizations, as a way to try to drive value and deal with some of these issues that you just shared with me in terms of challenges. They're all kind of unique, not only to healthcare, but other organizations. We start with well-defined, measurable, and timely improvement projects. I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by projects, but that's DMAIC or other improvement type of projects, but they need to be well-defined and quantified in terms of value. And by well-defined is something that we're going to commit ourselves to do in just a few weeks or months, not 6 months, not 12 months or 18 months, but 3 or 4 months at the most, maybe sooner. So very well-defined small projects. We're going to develop, by doing this and being successful with that, we start to build the capabilities of the organization. And that's where you start to create that culture of problem solvers, but you're also creating that ability to be agile and adaptive as an organization. What you're doing then is through practice, and this is what's become a passion of mine in doing this work over the last 3 decades. I'm an engineer by training and researcher, but I've really got fascinated with the people side and the culture side of making things happen, because it really intrigues me what drives people to work together to solve problems, and which is what we need to do in organizations, particularly complex organizations like healthcare, and why sometimes we do not work together to solve problems, because that's really the challenge. But by being successful in these small, meaningful projects, you're creating that culture change and a culture of problem solvers. So what we want to be able to do is create a sustainable, continuous value creation, or more importantly, a value machine. You could think of it as that. And a way to start that is a way to kind of quantify, or a way to keep score. We all need to keep score. It's a way to, whether we're playing a game or we're tracking results in business, it's a way to kind of let us know how we're doing. It's a way to give us feedback. It's a way to kind of ground us in reality. We think we're doing well, but then we look at the score and find out we're not doing so well. Now we can change something, but you've got to keep score. So let's talk about how to keep score. This is a not terribly new concept in terms of this formula I'm going to share with you. It's been around for quite some time. But it's gotten a lot of traction, a lot of energy starting in the government in the U.S., state and federal, and now in healthcare, as a way to kind of look at value creation when it's not something where it's not necessarily going to be dollars that go to a bottom line that I pull out of a budget, but I can count on and share with my constituents, whether it's the community, my patients, the value that's being produced by our improvement efforts. It actually ties to some work that I'll talk to in just a little bit, but value creation is basically a quality throughput divided by the resources or the operating expenses it took to create that. So the number of good things I'm producing, good results, the volume of those transactions of the people served, and the cost it took to do that. So value basically is efficiency of the system. So whether I can say that I've changed my budget or increased revenue, I can always track. If I know my cost and I know how much work we've done, how many patients we've seen, I can track the efficiency of the system. It's also a way then to track consistent with the mission. If I'm a healthcare organization or a hospital system, and I've got into this work to kind of do good in the community, to improve the population health in my local community, I'm not so much worried about the financial viability as much as I am as patient care. So being able to track something that goes to the quality of what we're doing and being good stewards of the resources to do it is a way that is very consistent with the mission, whether I'm a healthcare provider or a public servant in a government somewhere. Now, this value metric, it actually comes from Ellie Goldratt. You may recognize that name, those of you that are Lean Six Sigma nerds like myself. Ellie Goldratt was the first book was The Goal. And his the author of Theory of Constraints, fantastic tool, again part of the Lean Six Sigma toolbox. This has also been put to use in several state governments with a lot of success. This is one of the first areas of the Director of Business Transformations in the state of Texas. And of course, one of the leading thinkers on this, a Harvard professor, Mark Moore, who has really kind of coined using this as a way to kind of track providing value to the public. And so it's the public sector of government has really picked that up quite a bit. So let me talk a little bit more. So that's it may make it sound more complicated than it needs to be. So let's just do a simple example. So this is all we're talking about. You've been asked to make some pizzas for the big party this weekend. You get 10 pizzas. It's going to cost you $100. I'm making the math real simple because if I make it more complicated, I'll mess it up as we go through the conversation. So I've got 10 pizzas I got to make. I got $100. You'd say, all right, it's $10 a pizza, right? Well, however, I make those pizzas. It doesn't go perfect. I make 7 good pizzas, 3 bad ones. I can't take them to the party, so I only have 7 to take to the party. Out of that 7, then if I turn that into, so what is my performance for now, my baseline, if you will, my value? Well, in this metric, it's basically the quality throughput is 7, and the processor 7 out of 10 times 10, 70% good. My operating expense, again, easy math, 100. So basically, $100, 7 pizzas. Basically, it costs. If I turn that into just an indicator that I can start to track, then it's 0.07. Or if I want to do a cost per unit, I just invert that and says, oh, it's $14, not $10 a pizza, but it's $14.29 a pizza. But now I've got some way to kind of track the good output based on how much it costs me to do that. And if I want to improve this, then I've got several kind of knobs or adjustments I can make. If I improve the quality and I get 8 good pizzas out for the same $100, then my value goes up. Or if I'm able to get more pizzas out with that same $100, I baked 11, but I only still got 70% good. I still improve my value. And then, of course, if I can get the 7 out, still got 3 that didn't turn out good, but I cut my cost. I did it for $90, then I still increased my value. So just an example of a way to keep score. And if you think about any business unit, any industry, if I'm providing a service, even if it goes to another department inside the business, I can keep track of how much it cost me to do that and how much I was able to produce. So I've got a way to kind of track progress. So value creation, key first step to being able to create the momentum that helps us deal with talking to stakeholders, because all the stakeholders can agree if we're trying to get everybody to kind of work together that, hey, it's all about adding value to the customer and adding value to the business. And then we'll find the time to make things happen. So let's talk about going from pizzas to projects and how to create this system for the business. So we, as I've mentioned at Go Lean Six Sigma, we provide online training, green belt, black belt, yellow belt training, a lot of focus on projects. What we help our clients do though is get a good return on investment by turning that training into successful improvement projects. If you really want to create value, let's talk about it from the business and strategy standpoint. What we're talking about is a portfolio of projects that start with business problems that the leadership identifies, and they turn those into a flow of meaningful projects that we're going to resource over time with green belts, black belts to kind of get those projects done. A meaningful project we'll talk just a little bit more about is a project that's well-defined that we can do in 3 or 4 months. That's got a very clear value that's based in the value metric I just talked about, that's tied to the real data that goes on in the operation. And it's a prioritized list that's identified by the leadership of the organization. Senior leaders, middle management, they prioritize the projects they want to implement, and they put them in the stream, and we'll resource and execute those, make sure they get implemented in a timely manner. In the U.S., particularly in the financial system, sales outstanding, you're waiting to get paid for goods we've sold, is not even is considered bankable collateral if you're trying to get a loan or if you're trying to get a cash flow in a financial institution, even though you have no control as a business on how long it's going to take your customers to pay you. On the other hand, a well-defined Six Sigma project is like money in the bank. You've got a project, we know if we implement this in the next 3 or 4 months, it's going to create a value of $100 or $1,000. As a matter of fact, we know from experience, conservatively, that an average greenbelt project is going to save us around $50,000 if we did it in financial numbers, or $100,000 per project for black belts. 15,000 for yellow belts. So we can actually put, those are conservative averages. Obviously, it's different from business to business. If I'm in the manufacturing world with a lot of capital and so forth involved, then the values are much higher. If I'm in a service, then the values are going to be lower, toward that low end, toward that 15, 50, and 100, like in healthcare. All right, so I'm keeping track of time here. I want to hit a couple more things, and then I want to leave some time for some Q&A. So to create this value stream, if you will, or value creation machine, we need a steady stream of meaningful projects. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Reliable assessment of the potential for creating value. That's that quality throughput divided by the OE. To get those projects done quickly, 3 or 4 months, not 8, 12 months. And we need leadership engagement. Those are the kind of things that really make this happen. Let me ask you, this is another quick poll. Answer A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, or D, pick one. Which one of these do you think would be your biggest challenge in your organization or in your experience? And I'll just kind of do a real quick tally, kind of watch them come through. A, B, C, or D. See a lot of A's, B's. There's a C. Some D's. Well, it looks like we're getting spread A. Okay. B and C. Okay. Couple of those. Yeah, reliable. Okay. Well, this list is here for a reason, because these are all challenges. If you can't do all these, then it's difficult to be successful. And so the approach, both in the training that we do and the support that we do and the other methods that we do at GoLean can help make this happen. Starting with, if you talk about the metrics and the B, it's that value creation and having the financial as well as the process output, the productivity numbers to make that happen. But the thing about steady stream of projects, I'll show you a little bit more how to make that happen. And with the way we do A, make sure that we can do C and D. So I've already talked about how to do B, but we need to have the right people do that. And once we have that happen, then the rest of this starts to take care of itself. I'll walk through this quickly, and then we'll do some Q&A. Okay, so meaningful projects are this. A verifiable problem that we don't know the causes and therefore not the solutions. That's what DMAIC's all geared toward. It's aligned to the business, our strategy, and the customer, but we also understand the how much it costs us to produce this output and what the actual output happens to be. But also a project needs to be something that's prioritized and leadership's willing to champion. So we'll talk about how we make that happen in just a little bit. So we're really talking about a portfolio of projects at various stages, a steady stream of improvement that's basically tangible, that you can actually predict it. Well, here's what we'd say we'd do. You start with raw project ideas. This comes from the strategic planning. It comes throughout the organization. These are just ideas. It can come from anywhere. You need about at least 5 times the number of ideas as projects you anticipate to implement. So it means you need to have some thought about how many project leaders I need trained, how many projects I can afford to run. Maybe it's only 3 or 4 a quarter, maybe it's 15 a quarter. You can decide what that needs to be. Start slow, you can always go faster. You're going to define these projects. Those of you with Lean Six Sigma experience, you know all about chartering. We're going to charter those projects, but we're going to take those raw ideas and we're going to be getting that financial information to be able to do that value calculation I just talked about. So we need some people to do that. That's some of leadership, as well as train green belts and black belts. Before we launch a project, they're going to define it so that we can prioritize it. So the business can start to prioritize that project to make sure it's important. Once we've got a validated list of projects that are prioritized, we want to have at least more than one project for every team. Like say, I'm going to do 5 projects this quarter, then I got to have at least 5 validated projects, if not more. We want to have more than that one per project. So we want to have some in the pipeline waiting for the next project to come through. And then we've got active projects that need to be championed. They need to be coached and led. And then lastly, of course, finishing those projects, closing them out, going through the DMAIC methodology. What we're really looking to do here then is drive a steady stream of improvement. The way that happens is you've got to engage leadership, as a lot of you kind of mentioned as one of the challenges to make this happen. And that's baked into this process, because leadership is going to be involved in identifying the projects through a structured approach, prioritizing those projects, and then they're going to coach these projects and track these through the pipeline, making sure they do regular reviews of progress and set direction and remove obstacles. So it's a lot of kind of blocking and tackling, or the kind of mechanics work of making things happen. So timely projects, it was another one you mentioned quite a bit of. Several of you said was one of the biggest challenges. Well, first off, it starts with a well-defined project. So spending more time defining it and making sure it's a priority, then we'll put the right resources to it. So it needs to be well-defined and vetted. We need to make sure we dedicate the green belts or the black belts to get it done. They need to be coached as they go through the methodology, and we need to have leadership engaged in doing that. Well, if leadership has identified these projects, they said they're important, we need them to meet our goals, then they're very likely going to be involved in making that happen. Okay, one last thing, and I'll open it up for questions. One of the things we do when we work with organizations, and they talk about the fact that it's difficult to afford to have a lot of people trained and running projects. Green belts are part-time, black belts are recommended to be full-time. And when you look at some of the best practices out there, the best practice for black belts is 1 to 3% of the organization. So look at these numbers real quick, and then we'll open it up for questions. For a medium-sized to small company with about 800 employees, that 1 to 3% of full-time project leaders is around 8 to 24. Most businesses will say, and particularly healthcare will say, we can't afford that. So it's all right. Instead of 8 to 24, let's say, what if you had 5, that you could dedicate to work on projects? And a black belt, once they are trained, can usually do about 3 projects a year, conservatively. These are all conservative numbers. And even if they do 3 a year, let's just say 80% of those are actually going to be successful, that are going to get any results. And so if you look at these numbers real quick, the point here that we say at an average of 100,000 a year, that over the course of 5 years, an organization is talking about over $6 million in savings just from this investment of 5 project leaders. So it really kind of points to the fact that you'll find a way to afford these if you realize that as you compound this over the course of 5 years, we're talking about almost 20 million as you look at the cumulative effort of what you get from year to year. So a lot of value being left on the table. Find a place to start with your projects to get going. Anyway, last thing, and I'll open it up for questions. I'm watching our time. So how to get started? Well, just start slow. You can always go faster. Start to identify a few meaningful projects, define them well with a charter, and link to business and strategy, and leadership is motivated to solve them. Calculate the value proposition for those based on not just bottom line dollars or cutting costs, but just inputs over outputs. Identify your best people to lead those projects, and then make sure they go through and get finished in 3 or 4 months. So scope them properly so they'd be done very quickly. So that's what I have to share with you today. I really appreciate your time. If I can answer any questions for you in the long term, you can reach out to me at golean6sigma.com.